From the heart of Central Florida, you're listening to the most electrifying show in media. A Neighbor's Choice. I'm your host, David Gornoski, happy to be back with you. And now it's Thursday, so we're doing our Science and You edition of the show. We do this each Thursday. You can always enjoy it. If you miss one of the editions, you can go to neighborschoice.com, search for Science. You'll find our archives, and you'll be glad to, because we get into some of the most fascinating world topics in science and provide a unique perspective on these topics in a way that makes sense for everyone who's listening. And joining me now is my chief science advisor for all things A Neighbor's Choice, physicist Dr. Yu. How you doing?
Thank you for having me on again.
I'm glad to hear from you again, because we always like to go through these different news stories that are coming in all the time in the world of science. So let's get right to it, shall we?
Okay.
We have the first story that I thought was interesting. It says, mining with microbe animal magnetism. And this is from Berkeley Research, berkeley.edu, and it talks about microscopic miners. It says some species of aquatic bacteria draw in dissolved iron from their watery environment and store it in specialized compartments called magnetosomes. They use its magnetic properties to navigate, sort of like ancient mariners using a lodestone to keep their bearings. Did you see this story?
Yes, I saw the story. I thought that it's amazing. They find out, microbes, or we call it bacteria, they can mining magnetic material becomes a part of their body, and they use those magnetic properties in their compartment, form a line of just like a magnetic bar of magnets, and they can navigate through the dark space, a place under the sea and the bottom of the water. And the interesting is, the bacteria or the microbe are single cell creatures, right?
Right.
They don't have eyes, but we know they do navigate. And so that's the research you try to find out how the process works. I believe that's the professor's motivation. And what they find, they navigate through magnetic particles, because they do mining magnetic particles stored in their body. And also they find out another strange phenomenon. They said that they also mining those iron particles, however, make it stored in a different place and make it not a magnetic type of particle. So they have either ionized, so that's like an iron type of a magnetic particle, or they have a neutral particle that store in two different places.
Interesting.
So that's what they think about it. Could have some applications, let the microbe mining not just magnetic particles, and could be other metals, and also because they have magnetic particles, so that's called a magnetite, in their bones, they can use a magnet to abstract those materials and can direct them in motion. So there's some potential applications. I thought it's interesting.
Any takeaway points from your theory that people can think about?
Oh, yes. If you look at the bigger picture, if every single, this is a bacteria or microbes. Microbes that made the entire human body, right? Biological sphere is all made by this one. If a microbe has a magnetic property, has a magnetic particle, so what about a human being? So we are a big, giant magnetic body. So that's why we can sense north and south. We can sense direction. based on the Earth's magnetic field. Yeah. So the implication, the human body is all made by this magnetic particle. Actually, every single particles, matter particles in the world are fundamentally are magnetic particles. So that's very significant.
Another story that I saw is in Science Tech Daily says physicists may have solved the long-standing mystery of matter and antimatter, and it's kind of a complex story. But just for the sake of our argument, has that been discovered? And what's your take on this report?
Oh, okay. So let me just say, so what they actually discovered. They find out, the biggest mystery, one of the biggest mystery in physics is, physics predict the world has not just matter and also have antimatter. That's based on the best physical theory called the standard model, or it's a quantum mechanical model, okay? So, if that's true, the question says, so why we only see matters on majority of matter, we seldom see antimatters. So since the physical theory predicts for every matter particle, it has to have an antimatter particle created during Big Bang. So they should be equally numbered. But why is matter is more than antimatter? So that's why make this physical discovery significant. Because they based on the one exception. They said that, matter and antimatter created at the Big Bang are exactly the same amount. However, they said that if the universe is asymmetric, somehow, if something is asymmetric, so their decay rate will be different. So that means, the antimatter decayed faster. So that's why we don't see antimatter as much as matter. So that's how they find that their researchers discovered the shape of isotopes of called the thorium, one type of element. They find that normally we believe the shape of the nucleus of all atoms, we're assuming they are probably spherical, But they find out based on their tests, they said, no, actually, based on this is a thorium, this is a radioactive material. Based on the isotope of this material, so they can detect the shape is actually not spherical, like a pierce type of shape. Huh. So this give their idea, say, okay, if the shape is not spherical, so then the world, maybe the material is not purely spherical, so maybe give us a non-symmetrical flavor of the material. If it's non-spherical, non-symmetrical, so they might can explain this asymmetrical universe. So antimatter decay faster than matter.
Right.
So that holds the thesis for this discovery. But in terms of my opinion, I don't believe antimatter even exists. The so-called, and we do have a matter and antimatter. If you consider antimatter is everything the same as the matter, only thing different than charge. If you define antimatter that way, I said, oh yeah, that's fine. The reason is that I believe every single matter particles are made both positive and negative charge. It will have both of them. So if you say, okay, another particle, they also have a positive and negative charge. They have both of them. If you say, oh, this one's the opposite of that one, that's fine. If this is opposite, then the other part of the pole will be the same as well. If you define that way, I would say, okay, that antimatter, matter and antimatter are the same thing. It's themselves. The only reason I do not call those kind of particles called antimatter, because the definition of antimatter is when antimatter meets with matter, they annihilated, means disappeared. We're talking about the energy cannot be disappeared. But they said that if you have a matter antimatter, the matter disappeared and created pure energy. I do not believe such a material even exists.
Wow.
So matter can disappeared and becomes energy. I don't believe that could exist.
So that may be science fiction, the idea of antimatter.
I believe that's the best way to say. Yeah.
Here's a quick story. We got just a little bit of time here. In Forbes, how hackers use an ordinary light bulb to spy on conversations 80 feet away. Apparently, you're able to listen to what people are saying in another faraway place by getting into their light bulb. Can you talk about this?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So this is a very interesting story too. You know, so right now we're talking about some kind of Google's Alexa or something. So many electronic device they can becomes a spying device, monitoring human conversation, right?
Right.
So this one is different. They said something called a Dharma disconnected object. They said that the hanging from the ceiling, the hanging light bulb. So we use this one as a spying device. So I wanted to explain how this one works. Okay. So basically, in order for us to detect some kind of conversation, right? What do we recording vibration, because sound is a vibration wave, right? So what kind of vibration sound create easier vibration? They think any hanging light bulb from the ceiling is in the air. So that whenever you have a conversation, what happens is the conversation creates an acoustic wave called create oscillation or say vibration on the light bulb. So then if that's true, they actually test it. So they use a telescope shining on the light bulb. So in order to monitor this one, they first use a telescope, have to have a light path from the light bulb to the telescope. So telescope can see the light bulb. And then they attach a sensor to the telescope. So whenever have a vibration signal, and what turns out from the telescope turns out the vibrational optics, right? So they use that sensor, convert the vibration of sensor, into electronic signal. So once you're turning anything to electronic signal, any waves of electronic signal, what you can use some Google software, use Google software can interpret the signal, and if it's a conversation, they can tell you exactly what they're talking about because all the sound are wave signals, right? So
wow.
That's why they said, if we can directly observe a light bulb from say 25 meters away, 80 feet away, they said, we can spy on people without using using any special equipment, compromised device, and undetected.
Wow, very interesting.
If somebody uses curtain, then you don't see it.
Dr. Yu, always a pleasure. We're gonna wrap it up here, and because we have a special guest. Remember Craig Cecil? He was in prison for life,
yeah.
And we've had him on the show. Well, now he's calling in from home. He's got home confinement, compassionate release by Bill Barr because of coronavirus. So we're going to hear how Craig Cecil's doing now that he's back in his home after 18 years of being in federal prison for a nonviolent marijuana charge. We won't want to miss this.
You are the first one.
Dr. Yu, we won't want to miss this. We'll be back in a moment with Craig Cecil.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It can be devastating. There is a law firm in Tampa Bay that will keep you informed throughout the entire process. That law firm is Catania & Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania & Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims do not even realize that they can claim compensation for their loss until they talk to Catania & Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com, award-winning over 28 years and family first. Catania & Catania personal injury, auto accident, and motorcycle accident attorneys.
United we stand. That's never been more important than it is today. Now you can show your commitment to our president and the nation with the limited edition Trump 2020 American Eagle Silver Dollars. Show your support with the limited edition American Silver Eagles, specially priced from government.com. Just call 1-800-571-6468. Hold the weight of democracy in your hand with new, perfect, uncirculated condition Silver Eagle coins. These historic coins, signed into law by Reagan, have been America's money since 1986. To secure your new limited edition Trump 2020 American Eagle Silver Dollar coins, call 1-800-571-6468. Call now and we'll give you a free Trump 2020 Patriots Pack, including a Declaration of Independence commemorative and 5 Lincoln cents when you order. Call now to secure your silver dollar coins, plus get your free Trump 2020 Patriots Pack, valued at over $10, free with every order. 1-800-571-6468. That's 1-800-571-6468.
The one thing that we have learned from a pandemic is that if we are healthy, we are less likely to be susceptible to grave sickness. With that said, stem cell activation is a big part of keeping ourselves healthy. By activating your own stem cells, you experience energy, sleep, reduction in pain, and a support system that promotes faster healing from wounds. LifeWave B radio patches are an easy, cost, affordable way to activate stem cells. Clinical studies demonstrate that LifeWave patches reset the genes in the body to a younger and healthier state. By wearing the daily patch, your body will activate stem cells to benefit a healthier and productive life. Go to lifeway.com/B radio to see how you can elevate, activate, and regenerate your life with stem cell therapy. There is a special offer with B Radio. The address again is lifewave.com/B radio. The address again is lifewave.com/B radio. Live healthier and wiser with the LifeWave B radio patches at lifewave.com/B radio.
We're soaring high across a neighbor's choice land in the Sunshine State. I'm David Gornoski. We're live, and I'm really happy now because we have another great friend of our program, someone that we've gotten to know over the last few years as we've been on air, and someone I consider a friend. And we've got a great monumental victory this week for our friend. I first had his daughter on, Lauren Cecil, on my program, one of the first guests who came on my show, and talking about the story of her father, who had been serving a life sentence for a tangential role in marijuana. And now this life sentence has been reduced to home confinement for compassionate release because of coronavirus. And now Craig Cecil joins me for the first time from his home. Craig, how you doing?
I'm doing a heck of a lot better than I was 2 days ago.
Yeah, I bet.
The scenery is, much, much, much better.
And I tell you, I think you're working on your new smartphone. How you feel getting used to that, huh? You getting used to the phone?
Well, I was in prison since shortly after September 11th. So I've been in prison over 18, coming up on 19 years. So just everything has changed.
Yeah.
I who would think that at 60 years old, I would have no idea how to make a telephone call.
Right.
And that's what I've been dealing with the last couple of days.
Well, welcome to 2020. You're back into the outside, and it's amazing how, you have always kept your spirit so strong and upbeat. You're an inspiration for a lot of folks, Craig, and I got to tell you, I just wanted to have you on in this segment just to celebrate with you live for our listening audience. You've called in when we were just in Orlando, and now we're in Tampa Bay as well as Orlando and worldwide on our podcast. And I know a lot of folks have been listening. We've got folks in Ethiopia, folks in Norway, folks in Indonesia, I was just looking online, a lot of international people listening, and your message has been spreading far and wide because you'd never let your life sentence get you down. And I think that's amazing.
Well, and I hope you've seen the headlines out of my case, is I'm really here at home with my daughter and son-in-law to be, because of a grassroots effort of people helping like you. What had happened is the Congress and the President signed the CARES Act a few weeks ago, and part of that was a provision that they could send people home that were vulnerable to dying or whatever because of the coronavirus pandemic, that they could send them home temporarily from prison, to keep them from getting exposed to that. And well, my name came up as eligible. I'm nonviolent. I have no criminal history at all. I'm on a marijuana charge. I'm not much of a threat to society. So my name came up, but the warden at the prison just said, absolutely not. I'm not going to let anybody go until we have a major breakout of COVID here.
Right.
In which case it would be too late for people like me. Well, a whole bunch of people took up a writing and emailing initiative, sending all kinds of messages and letters to the director of the Bureau of Prisons and the Attorney General, Mr. Barr, saying, why is this man in prison when the law allows, for people like him to not be endangered by this? Well, lo and behold, less than 2 weeks later, I heard from the warden myself that he was told by Washington, D.C., this is his words, to reconsider my denial, that they don't see any reason that I should have been denied.
Wow.
So right then and there, he made arrangements to send me home, and here I am.
Well, it feels great.
This is not my doing. It's not a fancy maneuvering by a lawyer. It's not, anything of the sort. This is grassroots, real people in the United States just writing letters and making phone calls, to our government officials saying that this is how we want our government run. And they did it. Here I am.
Yeah, it's amazing. You're back in your home with your family, and I know your daughter has been a champion for you for so long, and many other folks. Amy Pova is the one that introduced me to you, and you yourself. I love your spirit because you would send me letters typed up sometimes from your prison typewriter, and I'd send them off, and I was just looking online. The last one that was published was just a couple weeks ago, basically, at Foundation for Economic Education. You can look at it, and it's titled Reflections of an Essential Businessman Doing Life Without Parole. That's your letter that you wrote me. It's at fee. So you've really made an impact with your story, and I think it's just beginning, Craig. I think the best is yet to come for you. We're going to have to get you clemency so you can get your full freedom back. That's next, right?
Oh, yes, and just think of how much better my argument can be. Because, look at me now. I'm on home confinement. I'm looking out the window at the world, and I can walk out the door. I can go, I can get special permission to go to the store and all that. So in many ways, live like a real person out here. So when it comes down to how would I live if I got out of prison, I can make a showing of exactly how I would live as a law-abiding citizen.
And a brilliant writer too, Craig, and I can't wait to see you do more with your power of your pen because you've triumphed over the power of the sword. We're out of time, but Craig, we're going to have you on again real soon, okay? Congratulations.
All right. I will be here, and I will keep in touch. Thank you, and thank you for...
turn over in his grave if he saw what's going on today.
Crazy things are happening.
You cannot be afraid. You've got to stand up for what you believe is right.
But one thing is for sure.
You can't trust anybody.
For talk, news, and information, you can count on us.
Enough is enough. I almost blew a gasket.
Good for the country.
I know what I'm talking about. A lot of wackos out there.
Your connection to talk about it. The all-new News Talk 1040 WHP.
COVID-19 cases are spiking as states continue to reopen their economies, including in Oklahoma, where President Trump is scheduled to hold a rally on Saturday. Also in Alabama, where the president of the state's hospital association says they can't worry about a second wave yet if they're still in the first wave. And in California, Governor Gavin Newsom is making face coverings mandatory in public, when it's not possible to social distance. Worries about how a second wave of cases might affect an economic recovery kept the markets today at a near standstill. So what's next in the fight over immigration reform now that Supreme Court has held up DACA?
Please, you heard the Supreme Court speak to the Dreamers. Time to act. Give the Dreamers a permanent home the way they deserve here in America.
California's Attorney General Javier Becerra with a message to Congress. Garrett Wolf, the former Atlanta cop charged with Rayshard Brooks's murder, has now turned himself in. Daria Albiner, ABC News.
And we're back on A Neighbor's Choice. I'm David Gornoski, happy to be with you all. And we are now turning to our friend who is the president of the Mises Institute, which is the foremost think tank in America for understanding free markets and how they work, how money works, how economies work, how pricing works, all the different things that affect your life, but not just in that micro scale, but how it works on the macro scale too. Mises.org is their website, and we have their president, Jeff Deist. How you doing, Jeff?
David, I'm doing great. Thank you.
And I don't know if you saw that last segment, but we have a great news that we've been celebrating this week. You know that when I spoke at the Mises Orlando event at University of Central Florida, who some of us may be listening from there right now as we speak, that we had a surprise call from my friend Craig Cecil, who's been serving a life sentence for doing body work on trucks moving marijuana. And we just had Craig on the phone in the last segment, and he's now been given compassionate release to home confinement. So he's now with his family. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah, it's good to hear. And from my understanding, it was because of COVID, and we're finally starting to realize that some of these nonviolent people don't need to be in jail.
Right. And it's been an exciting thing to see, at least on a few fronts, Jeff. This COVID thing has turned out to be an opportunity for liberty for a lot of, in the case of education, where people now start to think maybe, just maybe, I don't need to go to college if it's going to be a real crazy situation there. Maybe, just maybe, I don't need to send my kid to public school if it's going to be like a quarantine room where E.T. was in the movie E.T. Or maybe, just maybe, we don't need to lock everybody up if there's a raging pandemic. So those two areas, the school and the prison, which is a whole pipeline and at the heart of the state, have really taken a kind of a hit here, haven't they?
Well, institutions in general were under attack in terms of their own credibility, even before the COVID crisis and now the Black Lives Matter protests happening across the country. So all this was already baked into the cake, but it's accelerated in the past couple of months. And people are looking at this stuff, David. Most of all, they're looking at people in government who are supposed to, maintain our economy and maintain public health and keep us from rioting and looting and all these other things, protect our property, protect our lives, provide state-funded education, provide state-funded medical care, and they're not doing any of this. None of this is working. So people are looking at this and saying, "Why am I paying all these taxes? What am I getting? What's going on in America?" And so it's a dangerous time because people don't know where to turn. They don't know if they want more government or less. They're even questioning the concept of police. So, honestly, the people who've been running the show deserve this. They weren't prepared for what is really just a slightly more virulent kind of common cold or flu. They certainly weren't prepared to deal with riots or rioters or looters. And so here we are. And if there's any silver lining, it's small victories like your friend getting released from jail.
Yeah, and I think it's going to set a precedent, though, that future generations will long get past. Jeff, it's interesting that the heart of the state is its ability to use violence to get its way in situations that we would not. So, for example, it's not right for us as individuals to, point a gun at somebody's face and say, you look like you're drunk while you're driving. we're going to, use force if necessary and put you in a cage. We can't do that as an individual, but we can make the state make a law and let that happen under our watch. And the same thing goes for marijuana. You and I can't go up to a neighbor if we smell marijuana in their house and just barge in with a no-knock raid with guns pointed, put our, physical presence known and put them in a cage. We can't do that. It'd be disgusting, but we make other people do that on our behalf. But really the prison and policing are the heart of the state's government's oppressive encroachment into our lives. And those two institutions, for right or wrong reasons, are under a lot of criticism by the culture in a mainstream way we've never seen before, Jeff.
Well, we certainly haven't seen it in my lifetime. And the one thing that differentiates government from everyone else is their ability to use force and violence without recourse. You can't sue them. You can't use violence back, that sort of thing. And so when they can't even maintain order, when they can't even keep people away from, let's say, looting your store or running onto the freeway and threatening traffic and that sort of thing, that's what really gets people wondering. I would say this to our friends on the left: all of these riots, looting, arson, graffiti, violence in the streets, that's not going to help anyone's cause. It's certainly not going to make people wonder whether we should get rid of police. It's going to make people think we need more police. And there's a danger in thinking that your particular media or the social media, let's say, you consume is giving you an accurate perception of the world, because there's an awful lot of people out there thinking certain things silently, because right now it's dangerous for them to say things publicly, whether that's at work or otherwise. So, I would just caution people who think that destruction is something that needs to be done to address our problems, because really what you're doing is you're mimicking the state, you're mirroring the state, using violence and destroying property and taking things that don't belong to you. That's just private criminality, and that's not the way to address state criminality.
Right. Yeah, you become like the thing that you hate when you do that, don't you?
Well, I've noticed that some of our left progressive mayors, of which there are a lot more than there used to be. A lot of cities across America now have really deep blue progressive mayors, even in the middle of red states oftentimes. And what these mayors are finding out is that unlike the federal government, they can't print money, and it's not so easy to issue bond debt to raise money. And then with COVID, all of their sales tax revenue has plummeted, and property tax revenue and everything else. So here they are trying to get a hold of these cities, and these riots and protests, which they praised, aren't petering out. They're not just going away. Mm-hmm. And so you have sort of young, hip, white, progressive mayors in places like Minneapolis, and Mayor Ted Wheeler, who is the mayor of Portland, which is really sort of ground zero for left BLM Antifa types. And all of a sudden, the riots and the autonomous zones get close to his condominium. And Mayor Wheeler says, well, wait a minute, I don't want a Chaz in Portland. I don't agree with that. Well, the reason he doesn't agree with that is because it's getting awfully close to home. And so there's a lot of things that people on the left like in the abstract, but they don't like it in reality so much. And violence and looting close to their house is a good example of that. And David, the simple explanation is this: is progressivism, by definition, can never be satisfied. Mm-hmm. It never ends. There's never a final moment. There's never any sort of full expression of justice. It always needs more, more, more. And so progressives turn on each other, always have, always will. And a lot of our sort of do-gooder liberal friends are going to find out that the mob comes for them just as surely as it came for the people on the right while they cheered.
Right. Yeah, and that, you're already seeing that where, they're canceling, the cancel culture goes after very, very liberal and even very leftist folks. If they say anything wrong, they destroy any professor. Look what they did to Brett Weinstein. Remember that story? Feels like forever ago. But, he's a very, progressive left-wing guy from what I understand. And they chased him around with little gangs of students looking for him, because his Darwinism couldn't save him.
Well, he was actually physically at risk on his campus at
Yeah.
Evergreen College, I believe in the state of Washington. Michael Rechtenwald, who was a professor, also a left-wing professor for a long time
Yeah, we had
at
him. Yeah.
NYU,
We had him on last week. Yeah.
was someone who was really subjected to extreme hostility on campus. So campuses are they're safe spaces if you think a certain way, view the world a certain way, but they're not if you don't. And so, here's what's unusual when you talk about cancel culture, whether that means that we're getting rid of Aunt Jemima syrup off the shelves or whether we're getting rid of this poor football coach at Oklahoma State, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it was Oklahoma State, who was wearing a T-shirt of a conservative news network, and some of his players objected to that. I mean, we're canceling these people, but this isn't, I wouldn't call this the marketplace in action. I mean, this is really coming from a place that started in radical left-wing academia and sort of spread out willingly to corporate America. And so now you've got the whole world, at least in the West, sort of taking proactive steps to, throw their own people under the bus rather than have any, lose all their sales or whatever it might be. So it's, this is a very spooky time in America. And I don't think this is just marketplace phenomena. I've heard people say, well, the reason they're getting rid of Aunt Jemima is because it's offensive to a certain segment of the population, and therefore that's the free market at work, and you ought to be celebrating that. They're actually being in tune with the zeitgeist and in tune with their customers. And I don't think that's really what's happening here. I don't think there's hardly anyone, black or otherwise, who objected to the Aunt Jemima character or, the product, but yet it's more the corporation behind it, which in this case happens to be Quaker Corporation, a huge mega food corporation, just being nervous and looking around them and saying, oh my gosh, we don't want to be attacked. So I wouldn't call that the market per se. And honestly, David, you and I would say that they're far greater crime than having a benevolent, caricature of a matronly black woman to sell syrup. Their far greater crime is selling toxic carbohydrate sludge for people to put on top of their pancakes and develop diabetes and all kinds of problems. But that's a different conversation. Right.
Yeah, but it illustrates that the left's greatest glory is to focus on symbols, not real flesh and blood problems, And so they'll turn on a dime and go against Trump because he wants to have peace with the Taliban. And it's like, wait a second, you guys sound like Dick Cheney. Like, why are you like bloodthirsty warmongers that want to occupy people of color overseas? Well, because it helps us get more power. So we'll make an alliance with the neocons just like that. And that's the way. That's what happens though, Jeff. When you have this, they're not socially just. It's antisocial and it's unjust. So I don't even give them the terms that they want to take because they don't represent anything social or just. They represent an obsession with symbols, and they want to bludgeon people with symbols. And now they're going to go after, I think, Rice Krispie treats because the elves are too white. So this stuff is so stupid, but they're not going to do anything to actually help flesh and blood people of various colors around the world from our empire. No, they'll actually cheerlead for regime change in Syria if conservatives or whoever say we shouldn't do it.
Yeah, it's really like a bull lurching around in the china shop. And, Friedrich Hayek wrote an essay on social justice, which he called the mirage of social justice. And it really is a mirage because it's undefinable. Justice is always individual and specific. We look at a murderer and a murder victim, for example, and we get a jury, and we judge the actors involved very specifically. The idea that there can be societal-wide justice is very, very dangerous because you can never define it, and hence it can never be satisfied. And so when you have people talking about, we need justice for black people in America, the problem is that the black experience in America is not monolithic. And so you can't simply say that all people who share these superficial characteristics ought to be lauded and all these other people who share these superficial characteristics ought to be made to pay. It's just an absolute recipe for disaster in any society, especially a society that is purporting or attempting to make itself a diverse, multiracial society. That's if we don't have any underlying threads that bring us all together, if we don't have any sort of agreed upon baseline assumptions, then we're in for a very tough go.
Yeah, and that's what we'll continue to see as we navigate the news cycle, is that if we can't come together on a mess, that's what I liked about, you worked with Ron Paul, but Ron Paul always said freedom brings people together. And I think it really does. I know it doesn't feel like it. It feels like what brings people together is hate. And it's certainly true that hate does bring people together. That's why John Bolton and all these liberals are walking hand in hand together. It unites people to hate a common scapegoat. But I do think that there's a counter to that, which is the contagious nature of freedom. So when we continue, take a quick break, we'll continue with Jeff Deist, president of Mises.org. You can also follow him at Jeff Deist on Twitter as we continue to unpack this challenge that our country faces with building unity in the face of so much contagious hate.
A lawsuit is not something that anyone looks forward to. It can be devastating. There is a law firm in Tampa Bay that will keep you informed throughout the entire process. That law firm is Catania & Catania. Personal injury law is defended with full disclosure. There is no guessing game. If it's an auto accident, medical malpractice, nursing home negligence, unsafe working conditions, or motorcycle accidents, the law firm of Catania & Catania will handle the process worry-free from start to finish. Many victims do not even realize that they can claim compensation for their loss until they talk to Catania & Catania. They only represent private individuals and treat every case as if it's going to trial. Putting families first is more than just a slogan. It's their way of practicing law. It's a commitment to you. Remember, they don't get paid if you don't get paid. So go to CataniaCatania.com, award-winning over 28 years and family first. Catania & Catania, personal injury, auto accident, and motorcycle accident attorneys.
Hey, it's Bubba the Love Sponge. With all the coronavirus stuff going on, you've heard the CDC say wash your hands about a zillion times. Studies show that the average person touches their face 23 times an hour. Your nose, eyes, and mouth, that's called the T-zone. And the T-zone is the most important area to keep clean. And for over 12 years, there's this product called TheraWorks Protect. It's been used by millions of emergency room patients and medical clinics to support infection prevention. TheraWorks Protect is easy to use, and it's safe to apply several times a day on your hands and around your nose and eyes and mouth, better known again as the T-zone. Just apply a small amount into your hand and rub it in until it dries, and then apply another amount and rub it all over your T-zone. Finding hand sanitizer sometimes can be difficult, and now you can order TheraWorks Protect online. Just get it directly from them. Go to TZoneProtect.com and use the Bubba Kicker. When you use the Bubba /, you're going to get 20% off and free freight, and you're going to have it in a few days. Again, TZoneProtect.com /Bubba. Start protecting yourself and the ones that you love now.
Let's go way back and consider a quote from 2,000 years ago. This is Greg C. Truax with On the Point. The important Greek Stoic philosopher Epictetus offered this observation. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so we can listen twice as much as we speak. Consider that the year 2020 offers plenty of opportunity to become better listeners. After all, there are myriad views on the worldwide pandemic and economic crisis, protests and civic tension, and an impassioned presidential election. Why not turn 2020 into the year of listening? But being a good listener is a learned art. It will take practice. Sure, we all have our own opinions, but others do too. We often sharply disagree, which means in 2020, let's travel the path that leads us to a 2,000-year-old thought, to listen twice as much as we speak. This is Greg C. Truax.
Welcome back to A Neighbor's Choice. I'm here with Jeff Deist, president of the Mises Institute. And I just have to say, folks, Jeff is someone, I'm just going to say this for myself, okay? He's someone who was in the trenches with Ron Paul as Ron Paul was advocating the pardon of all nonviolent offenders in federal prison of all color and all race, gender. And you know what the glory of the left is? They're going after the elves on Rice Krispie treats. That's the difference. between folks who do not, I wouldn't say Jeff Deist is someone who does virtue signaling. I don't see that a lot. Okay. Jeff's he's pretty analytical. And, so here's a guy that's fighting for, real liberty, which would actually result in actual thousands and tens of thousands of families of minority communities being at home together without being deprived of their liberty. If his message had succeeded in the White House versus the left, which is glorious, and they're also going to go after cream of wheat, Jeff. They're going to get rid of that logo too. So watch out for your cream of wheat. Still going to be subsidized by your tax dollars, though.
Well, you shouldn't be eating too much wheat, especially the kind that they spray Roundup on anyway. But I will say this, if we simply had not invaded Iraq and Afghanistan, there's several $1 trillion right there, which would be available for it. I don't support reparations, but, nonetheless, if you're going to talk about that, where would the money come from? Well, there's a glaring example. An awful lot of historical black colleges could be funded with $3 or $4 trillion. So, we start to look at this contentious landscape we live in, and people fight and get really upset over stuff that in the big scheme of things is more minor than what's happening below the surface with government. And so, if you think racism's a problem, well, I think you need to look at government as the source of most of it. If you think people, need to have a UBI, well, then why do they have so little money? If you think housing is too expensive, why is it too expensive? If you think police are too violent, why are they too violent? And it's a lot more, I guess, satisfying. It scratches an itch to be an activist on Facebook or something like that and issue self-satisfied pronouncements, but it's a little tougher to look at the underlying or root problems of things rather than just trying to slap a Band-Aid on it. And we've been kicking the can down the road a long time in this country in terms of debt and deficit financing, paying for things using money from the future. And I think that it looks to me like the bill is coming due, and that's not just socially but financially too.
So Jeff, people are just wondering, all right, we got a lot of nasty tension in the community of America. A lot of people are saying, man, it looks like America's really turning a corner here into a bad place where we're going to turn into tribalism and fight over everything. And that's, we'll see how that goes. But, Peter Thiel is famous for proposing this idea that, one of the reasons why we have such animosity and such a clinging towards politics is because we have not really had any real innovation since the 1970s. We haven't had anything. We've had a massive amount of stagnation, and especially in the world of atoms, there's no innovation. There's a lot of innovation in bits, and that's why we're fighting tooth and nail over these gargantuans like Facebook and YouTube and Google. But there's so much regulation in the world of atoms that there's not that. That's the reason why we're turning towards fighting each other over every little issue, like Rice Krispie treats. Do you think there's something to that?
Yes, in the sense that the physical world has language in terms of innovation. When we look at airline, flying and highways and building materials and all kinds of things, all the exciting developments seem to have been in IT. And so I get his point there. But also I think he makes a point, which I absolutely share, which is that a lot of our seeming wealth in the past several decades has really just come out of sort of a phony financialization of the economy. It hasn't come because there's been real gains in productivity and real demand for real goods and services, and so we've all been getting more prosperous and richer. I think it's mostly come because the Federal Reserve has engineered a very low interest rate environment, and that's allowed a lot of companies to do all kinds of things with their own stock, with mergers and acquisitions. It's allowed an awful lot of startup companies to exist without making a profit for a lot longer than they probably should have. It's allowed a lot of people on Wall Street to sort of pump and dump companies and have really high valuations relative to any profits that the companies are actually making, and it's allowed the stock market and certain real estate markets, which are close to all the heartbeat, in D.C. and New York City and Silicon Valley, it's allowed these real estate markets to go through the roof. I think a lot of what we imagine is GDP growth and prosperity over the last couple decades is not real. In other words, there's an artificial quality to it, the courtesy of, in large part, central bank policy. And that is something that ought to frighten us. In other words, as we look around us and we see, let's say in Orlando, there's a lot of new fancy stores and stuff, and we say, well, is all this, have we earned this? Are we really this rich? Are we this productive? Have we actually created this brave new world, or have we borrowed against the future to enjoy it now? Mm-hmm. And it's very hard to actually show that because it's unseen. It's hard for social scientists to make unseen things tangible to people, because people just look and say, hey, there's a beautiful new strip mall and it's got some fancy new sushi place that I love. Okay, that's a tangible benefit, and you say the economy's good. But if in fact that new strip mall with the fancy sushi place would not have come into existence without the machinations of, let's say, the Federal Reserve, you have to worry about that. And the general public doesn't think a lot about the Fed, but I really view it as one of the huge drivers of mischief in our country.
Yeah, and it has so much of an effect. I'm thinking about people's concerns even for, families, and how we've lost our love of families. They've said that that's the problem of liberty. Too much liberty economics causes people to move away from their families. But you just mentioned the Fed, and that's another thing the Fed has done is, it has disunited us from doing things which keep our families together too, hasn't it?
Well, absolutely it has. Low interest rates create all kinds of moral hazards for people, and those moral hazards spill out into broader social and cultural things. Grandma gets her Social Security check so she can live 3,000 miles away, and never mind that Social Security is not going to be sustainable. Let's just live in the here and now. And because Grandma gets her Social Security check, that means we don't have to support her, which means that instead of just driving to see her this year, we're going to go to Europe this year. That sort of thing. I mean, it sort of goes out across society in a ripple effect, like throwing a stone in a pond. Mm-hmm. And what we really have to understand and think about is what makes a real economy and what makes a fake one. And what makes a real economy is people saving money and accumulating capital. And that isn't really what's been happening in the last several decades. It certainly has not been what's been happening since our last crash in 2008.
Yeah, and this is timeless wisdom, but it's timely wisdom too, Jeff, because if we're not going to change now, it's going to get a lot worse. I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate your message and your consistency in over the years and attacking the Fed, because nobody's doing it in the media, and it's great to hear you do it. Mises.org is the website. Thanks again, Jeff.
Hey, thank you, David.
Well, you've heard it, folks. It's time to start saving our money and stop spending so much. Get to work loving our families, loving our neighbors as ourselves. That's what you hear on A Neighbor's Choice, a positive message that you can be a part of in your own life. Don't wait for politicians to save you. You got to do it yourself. So go and love your neighbor and love your family and stay away from the groupthink of politics. Mises.org is the website to go to.
Your home for news, talk, and information. 1040 WHPO Pinellas Park, Tampa Bay's all news.